Hello, I'm Esther Gidhu. It's Wednesday, April 5th. This is Africa 54. Former U.S. President Donald Trump pleads not guilty in a New York court to 34 felony charges of falsifying business records. We'll have in-depth coverage. Panic, fear, horror and disbelief among Ugandan LGBTQ plus persons following the passage of anti-homosexuality legislation by the country's parliament. VOA Ignatius Ano reports on the bill's implications. This and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. We begin with the history-making arraignment of former U.S. President Donald Trump. Trump pleaded not guilty in a New York City courtroom to 34 felony charges of falsifying business records. Tuesday evening, the 45th U.S. president again denied the charges and attacked the Manhattan prosecutor's motives. VOA's Michael Sullivan has more.
Trump surrendered at a New York City courthouse where he denied charges of involvement in a scheme to hide accusations of sexual misconduct by falsifying business records, to hide payoffs to accusers, including a former adult film actor.
34 false statements made to cover up other crimes. These are felony crimes in New York State, no matter who you are.
Trump was greeted by supporters as he returned to Florida and was defiant in a televised address at his Mar-a-Lago resort, where he said the prosecutor was motivated by politics.
With a local failed district attorney charging a former president of the United States for the first time in history on a basis that every single pundit and legal analyst said, there is no case, there's no case.
But a grand jury of citizens voted to charge Trump, and one analyst says his attacks on the legal process will only backfire. Paul Schiff Berman teaches law at George Washington University. He spoke by Skype.
The case is going to be heard based on the facts and the law, and I also don't think it will help him in the main with the American people, because most Americans want the legal process to operate fully and fairly, even with regard to a former president.
People who gathered outside the New York courthouse were divided and passionate. Dion Cheney is a supporter.
I'm here to support my president, Donald Trump, the greatest president in American history, probably the best leader on planet Earth ever.
Jennifer Fisher is not a fan of Trump.
He's a con man. He has a lot of people still fooled. Most New Yorkers he doesn't fool, but I hope they'll see the light.
Trump faces the unprecedented indictment while he remains a leading contender for the Republican nomination for president. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News.
For reaction on the charges against Donald Trump, I'm joined live via Skype from New York by VOA Swahili reporter BMJ Muridhi. Hello, BMJ.
Hi, Esther. How are you doing?
I was wondering where you are. So describe to us how the atmosphere is like in New York City today after President Trump's appearance in the court yesterday.
Yes, I'm actually right outside the courthouse where former President Donald Trump was arraigned yesterday. And we can call it the calm after the storm, because you cannot really recognize this place if you were here yesterday. And it was a place that was swamped with all manner of people here, supporters, people who don't support former President Donald Trump, as well as lots and lots of security personnel. But today things are different out here, and I can say that New Yorkers are just going on with their business as usual today, after many days of anticipation, which culminated in former President Donald Trump being walking inside here and being arraigned.
BMJ, this case has generated a lot of interest in the United States and outside of the United States. What are you hearing from New Yorkers?
Yes, New Yorkers are saying different things. And as we heard from that report there by Mike Sullivan, it depends on who you are talking to. And especially if you're a Trump supporter, the story is the same. They see this as a case that is politically motivated. And quite a number of the people that I spoke to earlier today here say that Mr. Donald Trump might use this to his advantage. But on the other side, there are those who believe that this was what the former president deserved, becoming the first president or sitting former president to be arraigned here and charged with felony, charges. So it really depends on who you ask. But I must also say that the media here is awash with this news. Every paper, every newspaper here, not only here in New York, but around the U.S., is talking about this case. So there is a lot of chatter about what might happen or what might not happen heading towards 2024, when the former president is expected to be probably the nominee for the Republican Party.
And when is he expected back in the Manhattan court?
Now, according to the documents that were released here, in fact, the judge yesterday did mention that it is going to be on the 4th of December when he will return here for the after some of the processes that will take place. There will be something happening here in September, but the former president himself, will come back on the 4th of December to see, and that is when it will be determined whether this case will go into full hearing or whatever will follow after that.
BMJ, thank you very much. VOA Swahili reporter BMJ Murithi reporting live from New York. People across Africa are talking about the historic indictment of former U.S. President Donald Trump. VOA spoke with several on the streets of Nairobi, Kenya.
Truly, it means that no man is above the law. What has happened in America truly shows that no man is above the law. But when we come to Africa, them that are in power can never be taken to court. Reason is democracy is just a tool being used. That is, Africans are not educated enough to understand on how to make decisions. Yet they are given a chance that majority wins. The challenge is the majority are not educated. The majority are not enlightened. The majority do not make decisions by themselves.
Because of the way they do their things. But these other countries in Africa, the 3 countries, I don't think that can happen due to the political alienations and the coalitions. For example, in Kenya, where I come from, this is my country and where I'm staying, I think that cannot happen. Arresting a former president, it is almost null and void. Because right now you have a president, you have, for example, a former president, Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. You arrest him today, his people will come to say you are targeting our people. So that one is hindering the rule of law and the democratic space that we are also fighting for. Yeah.
A lot, in terms, it will actually help strengthen our democracy. If that happened in Africa, it shouldn't be seen as anything so peculiar, so strange. Well, if the rule of law is followed to the letter, then nothing should be more of anything to worry about. That is the reason why, if you look at Donald Trump himself, I mean, he's not shaken. He just knows that that is the law, nothing else but the law.
Residents of Nairobi reacting to the historic indictment of former U.S. President Donald Trump. For further analysis on the charges against the 45th U.S. President, I'm joined live via Skype from Maggie Valley, North Carolina by David Crane, founding Chief Prosecutor of the United Nations Special Court for Sierra Leone and a distinguished scholar in residence at Syracuse University's College of Law. Mr. Crane, welcome to Africa 54.
It's good to be with you.
Now, what do you make of the charges against Trump, and what do these reveal about this case?
I think it's really important for your listeners to fully understand that someone like Trump, someone like President Charles Taylor, initially scream, they holler, they say it's political, that they try to deflect what's going on. But at the end of the day, good prosecutors, like the prosecutor in Manhattan, like I did when I was in Freetown, Sierra Leone, made sure before they actually indicted the individual that they had an absolutely airtight case. And so I would strongly urge your listeners to understand that, in fact, Alvin Bragg has a strong case against Donald Trump, and will prosecute him for the various frauds and the business falsification of records for what he has been indicted for. There's 34 instances of what he has done. And I can assure you that he will be convicted and he will go to jail for what he has done, not only in this case, but 3 other cases that are coming up.
Now, David, prior to Trump's court appearance, the Stormy Daniels hush money payment was the most talked about of these charges. And of course, yesterday we had a few more charges coming out. But what stands out of these charges, and what should Trump and his lawyers be most concerned about?
Well, the payment of hush money is not illegal. That's not the problem. What they did, and there's 3 instances of payment of hush money. There's money to the doorman, there's money to Stormy Daniels, and another lady of which Trump was having an affair. They had approached a media organization looking for money so they could print what had been done. And so Trump, knowing the individual who ran the media company, put together a scheme by which these individuals would be paid hush money to not publish the story. And that's what they did. But to cover up that payment of various monies, they perpetrated fraud on the people of New York related to those payments. And so it's not about what he has done with those individuals, the 2 women involved. It's how he, in fact, tried to bury that money to keep it from the public eye. That is a fraud. That's misrepresentation. That's illegal in the state of New York, and it's a felony, and he'll be held accountable for it.
But what will it take then for the prosecutors to prove that Trump is guilty of these charges?
Well, again, all good prosecutors like myself, I've actually tried a similar case as this, but also I have also taken on a head of state, just like Donald Trump is a former head of state. He is innocent until proven guilty. The prosecutor, Alvin Bragg, has to prove his case beyond a reasonable doubt, but he has a solid case. He will bring in witnesses, but also, I think this is what is going to really put him in jail, is the actual documents themselves that will follow the money. And I think this is really, really important. There'll be assertions by various key individuals like the President of America Media Incorporated, as well as Michael Cohen and others who were insiders, who were part of all this, who will say, this is what happened. Our intent was to defraud the people of New York, to hide this money. And so then they'll have the paper trail, which actually will show that Donald Trump even signed the checks for the payment of this money. So again, Alvin Bragg did not bring these charges unless he had an airtight case, and he'll be held accountable for it.
David, very briefly, what should we take away from this case?
Well, as I told the people of Sierra Leone and West Africa, that no one is above the law, and the rule of law is more powerful than the rule of a gun. We should take heart that the rule of law is strong enough to take on and take down a sitting African head of state and also a former president of the United States. And I think that is something that your listeners should take heart in.
David, thank you very much for your perspective and insight into this report. David Crane is the founding chief prosecutor of the UN Special Court for Sierra Leone and a distinguished scholar in residence at the Syracuse University College of Law. Millions of Muslims worldwide are observing Ramadan, the holy month of fasting. In Tanzania, the month-long celebration holds a special place in the hearts of its people. Muslims fast during the day and eat celebratory iftar meals after sunset. However, increasing food prices and certain supplies are making this a challenge. Charles Kombe reports from Dar es Salaam.
Zainab Othman observes the holy month of Ramadan through fasting and prayer. The month is also an opportunity to strengthen her relationship with God. However, due to the increased food prices, iftar, the evening meal to break the day's fast during this month, has become a challenge.
Due to the current month of Ramadan, the prices of goods have increased. Previously, I used to buy rice for 1,800 Tanzanian shillings, but now I have to buy it for more than 3,000 shillings. The money I have is no longer enough due to the high prices of goods.
It is not only Athuman who feels the pinch, but many others in the country.
The prices are increasing because the farmers did not have a good harvest. So when we go to purchase goods, we only get limited quantities. As a result, we sell these products at higher prices to make a profit.
Some families are having to cut back on the variety and quantity of food they consume during the month of Ramadan. Due to high food prices, some are sharing iftar meals with neighbors and family members to ease their burden. Others are turning to less expensive food options. Despite the economic challenges, Tanzanian Muslims remain committed to observing Ramadan and are finding ways to adapt.
We are truly grateful to God. We do not have a large income, only a small one. But with the blessings of the whole month of Ramadan, despite the hardships of life, as we know, Ramadan is a blessed month. God blesses the little we have, and we are able to sustain ourselves for iftar and suhoor.
In the meantime, as the month of Ramadan continues, Tanzanian Muslims like Athman hope for a more stable food supply and a return to the traditional celebratory iftar meals that unite families and communities. Charles Kombe for VOA News in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania.
Panic, fear, horror, and disbelief. That is how many LGBTQ plus persons in Uganda are feeling following the passage of anti-homosexuality legislation by the country's parliament. However, some conservatives are welcoming the news. VOA's Ignatius Anol examines what is fueling rising anti-gay sentiments on the continent and its implications.
Analysts say religion and cultural values form the heart of anti-gay rhetoric across most parts of Africa. This belief is leading to attempts by African politicians to enact laws intended to punish LGBTQ plus community, also known as sexual minorities. Uganda's controversial bill, formerly known as the Anti-Homosexuality Act, slaps a life sentence on anyone who identifies as gay.
And that this bill, right Honourable Speaker, recognizes that same-sex attraction is not innate and immutable characteristic. It was also intended to protect our cherished culture, the legal, religious, and traditional family values of Ugandans, and acts that are likely to promote sexual promiscuity in this country.
President Yoweri Museveni has not yet signed the legislation into law, but it is alarming rights activists who worry about its implications on a group already facing discrimination in Uganda and the continent at large.
Sort of endorses homophobia in the public's eye because Parliament has basically made legislated homophobia, and so that means that people will feel justified in discriminating against people because of what they think their sexual identity is. May or may not be true. They can deny them housing, they can deny them jobs, they can beat them, they can assault them, and feel justified in doing that because the law says essentially that gay people shouldn't exist in Uganda. And we saw this happening 10 years ago when the first iteration of the Anti-Homosexuality Act was passed.
Almost 70 countries worldwide criminalize same-sex relationships. Of these, 32 are in Africa, including Nigeria, Ethiopia, Egypt, and Zimbabwe. Activists blame colonial laws passed down by colonizers for such legislation that continue to be on the books even decades after the end of colonization. Njiri Giteru, Executive Director of the National Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission in Kenya, says the implications of Uganda's bill are dire.
And also seeing them actually pass the bill has had a direct effect on the lives of queer people in Uganda. We've, in the last months, seen the increased number of attacks against LGBTQ people in Uganda and in Kenya in surrounding countries. And what this does is collapse any barrier of protection that queer people might have.
Only South Africa in 2006 has legalized same-sex marriage on the continent. In recent times, Angola, Botswana, Mozambique, Lesotho and the Seychelles Republic have also passed laws to decriminalize homosexuality.
There is hope for LGBTQ persons all over Africa, in that we are becoming more aware as people. We're becoming more aware of the spin, of the twisting of narratives, and people are beginning to question it.
The United Nations, the European Union and rights groups are calling on Museveni to veto the bill. Meanwhile, the United States is not ruling out sanctions against Uganda. U.S. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby says if the bill is signed into law, it could force the U.S. into repercussions that may be in an economic way. Ignatius Ano, VOA News, Washington.
Still to come, Sudan's economy struggles under the weight of high inflation. We'll have a report. Stay with us.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, we'll delve into Tuesday's arraignment of former U.S. President Donald Trump. We'll also have an in-depth conversation with Annette Weber, Special Envoy of the European Union to the Horn of Africa, about the prospect for peace in Ethiopia's Tigray region. Join me, Vincent Makori, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
In other news, the South African government says it has revoked a national state of disaster declared in February to manage a crippling electricity crisis. The government will now work through its Energy Crisis Committee to reduce the impact of power cuts using existing legislation, contingency arrangements, cooperative governance and traditional affairs. 3 doctors in Guinea have been found guilty in the death of a young woman who was raped in hospital. A criminal court in a suburb of Conakry found Daniel Lama, Patrice Lama and Celestine Milimono guilty of assault and battery resulting in death without intent and of abortion. Milimond and Patrice Lama were also convicted of rape. And financial market sources say West African countries of the 8-nation Economic and Monetary Union are struggling to raise funds on the regional capital market as investors demand high interest rates amid tightening liquidity. Economists say Sudan's economy is in dire shape. It's struggling under the weight of high inflation and the suspension of debt cancellation by Western nations since last October's coup. In an exclusive interview with VOA, Finance Minister Jibril Ibrahim tells Henry Wilkins about allegations the military government is trying to assert more control over the economy and its alleged links with Russia's Wagner Group.
Salah Awad Hamad is a butcher in Omdurman, Sudan's most populous city. He says his income went from 100,000 Sudanese pounds per month to 10,000 in the past 3 years as inflation in Sudan runs out of control.
I will not lie. 3 years ago, our situation was much better, even though the country was suffering from an embargo. The real problem is political conflicts. This country is ruined by politicians.
Many who spoke to VOA in Sudan say the political deadlock as military leaders try to retain control of the country instead of handing it over to civilians is having a negative impact on the standard of living. One expert said,
people don't have purchase power to buy anything. The majority of people at this point are really suffering. Again, we don't have reliable data, but we know, based on some UNICEF surveys, at least 50% of Sudanese children under the age of 5 are really malnourished and not having access to enough food.
In a recent interview with VOA, Sudanese Finance Minister Jibril Ibrahim expressed frustration at debt relief being held up by the international community since the military took power in 2021. He says it will be easier to bring the economy back under control once Sudan gets
civilian government satisfactory to the West. So we don't know whether the goalpost will move after we get the civilian government. They may ask for something else. They are not going to hurt those who are ruling, but they are going to hurt the ruled.
A recent overhaul relating to the state's finances has led to criticism that the military government, which analysts say is inherently corrupt, is attempting to gain more control of the economy. Asked if that was the case, Ibrahim said,
"Actually, that's not true. The initiative came from the Minister of Finance. We have companies wholly owned by the public sector, but we have no say over what they do and how they spend their money. And that's why we tried to show that the Minister of Finance have control over the public finance."
Sudan's links to Russia and the Kremlin-linked paramilitary group Wagner have been well publicised in the media. A report by the Organised Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, an investigative journalism non-profit, found Wagner working with political and military figures in Sudan to exploit the country's gold. Ibrahim said that his ministry, at least, was doing no such thing.
I don't see much of a financial link between Sudan and Russia. Possibly the military may have some connections of buying arms. Directly with the Minister of Finance, we don't have anything. No concession is given to Wagner.
As for ordinary people in Sudan, they say they just want to see an improvement in living standards. Jassim Ala Bakir Abdallah sells petrol by the side of the road.
Let me tell you something. I don't support civil or military governments. I only support successful governments.
Sudanese authorities have said a civilian government will be formed on April 11th. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Khartoum, Sudan.
And that wraps up our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.